My name is Jessica Edwards. I'm 28. I've been the one my family calls when Wi-Fi blinks, the printer jams, or someone forgets the password to the online invoice portal. I live in a warm, slightly crooked one-bedroom apartment above a bakery, the scent of vanilla and yeast curling through the floorboards in the morning. By day, I work at a logistics company, coordinating shipments and solving crises nobody notices until they're solved. By night, I teach beginner Spanish, French, and Italian online to people who say, "I've always wanted to learn," and then forget to do the homework. I am not wealthy, I am reliable, and in my family, those two truths are rarely understood together. If you asked my mother, she'd say, "Jessica is smart. She helps." The tone you reserve for a sturdy chair. If you asked about my younger sister Lila, she'd say, "Oh, Jessica, she's a wonder, always everywhere for everyone," and then laugh as if I floated above problems instead of carrying them. Lila is 25, radiant, golden in photographs, and louder in person. She moves through rooms like a parade, and I'm usually holding the rope, making sure no one trips, that no one crashes into the walls of her charm. Languages became my refuge. Verbs never raised their voices. Prepositions never judged. I taught myself French at 16 from a library book and felt a door quietly swing open in my head. Italian followed. Spanish, my home language, evolved into a skeleton key I could use anywhere. Words turned into side gigs. Side gigs paid the rent. But everyone admired the results. No one respected the boundary where those results ended. The week before Lila's baby shower, the one I arranged, booked, and funded entirely, I fell asleep across my kitchen table, forehead pressed to a spreadsheet. Venue, $1,800. Catering, $1,250. Decor and balloons, $290. DJ, $210. Miscellaneous, $150. Total, $3,700. I wrote the numbers twice. Repetition calms me. My mother had texted me a few days earlier. "We'll pay you back, little by little. That sentence is a lullaby for the naive." I still wanted to believe it. The morning of the shower, I arrived early, straightening table runners, taping cords so no one would trip. I wore a clean black shirt and shoes I could run in. I wanted to blend into the background. That was the point. By noon, the room filled. Lila glided in wearing white, one hand on her belly, the other scrolling her phone. Applause. I was behind the dessert table, cutting cupcakes, pretending to be invisible. The DJ asked for the Wi-Fi code. The caterer asked about refill timing. I answered both. Then I heard it. "Look at Jessica," Lila said in a loud, sing-song voice, the one she uses when she thinks no one understands her Spanish. So casual, so mean. Look at that cheap shirt and her voice, like a Chihuahua trying to sound elegant. The room laughed lightly. Her friend smirked. My aunt gave me that soft, knowing smile that means she's taking sides without witnesses. For a moment, I told myself I misheard. I teach Spanish, French, Italian. I understand every word. The words landed anyway, heavy as stones in my chest. I put the knife down. I walked over with a stack of napkins, calm. I smiled, quietly, in Spanish, then French, then Italian. The room hiccuped. The DJ lowered the music. My mother's jaw tightened in the thin line she uses to warn me, "Don't you dare." I didn't dare. I handed out cupcakes and let the moment settle into me like a small stone in my pocket. Later, after photos where I was the shadow holding the ring light, I stepped outside. The air was cool. The concrete smelled faintly like rain. My phone buzzed. A pending charge for $410, labeled extras. I scrolled, watched the green call button glow. One call, 4 words. Close the open bar. No shouting, no explanations, just the quiet assertion of limits. I remembered the pattern. We is warm in my family until the bill arrives. Then pronouns get specific. My dad would sigh over a paper bill like a wounded bird. "Jessica, I had $340. We'll fix it together." Together turned into never. My mother would say, "You always make it about money." I would nod, and the ledger of unpaid gratitude would grow. In college, I commuted for hours. Lila got a dorm because she needed the experience. I woke at 5 a.m., worked 2 jobs, tutored at night. I paid her deposits when her rent was late, wired her emergency cash, and quietly bore the weight of a family that needed me more than it appreciated me. Love, I told myself, was practical, and I lied a lot to convince myself of that. The day of the shower, I translated for the caterer in Spanish, corrected the DJ's invoice in English, and reassured security in Italian. For a moment, I thought maybe this was fine. Maybe my work, my patience, and my generosity were enough. Then Lila made her joke, and something inside me straightened. I didn't shout. I simply stopped kneeling. People ask why I didn't confront her on the spot. I did, quietly. They ask why I keep giving, if it hurts. Because every no in my family is heard as I won't. If I say, please respect me, they treat it as a foreign language. I am a translator. I should be able to translate my own limits. But that day I began learning the word enough. The seeds were planted. The weight I'd carried for years, the unpaid labor, the invisible sacrifices, began to shift. I knew the storm was coming. I just didn't yet know how fiercely I would stand. After the baby shower, I didn't sleep well. Not because of the noise, the clapping, or even Lila's sharp words, but because of the quiet realization. I had spent years bending so that others could lean on me, and no one had ever asked if I could bear it. I thought back to my 20s. Every time Lila needed money, I quietly transferred it. Rent, deposits, emergency flights, late tuition payments. I was the unseen safety net. I remembered wiring her $600 when she was 3 months late on her senior year apartment. A voice note arrived with a kiss sound and a cheerful, "You're the best." I believed love meant bending without counting. I was wrong. I wasn't just a financial buffer. I was a buffer for her emotions, for my parents' convenience, for everyone's small crises. When the landlord called, I handled it. When her grades dropped, I tutored. When the family needed translations, I gave them my words, always, quietly, behind the scenes. My life was organized, scheduled, carefully orchestrated, but it was invisible. And yet the pattern repeated. 2 nights after the shower, Lila sent a message. "Hey, can you cover the nursery rug now? We'll settle later. It's on sale." A link for $379. I typed back, "I already covered the shower." Her reply was swift. "It's all for the baby. All for the baby." That phrase had a strange gravity in my family. It was a skeleton key that opened every door. I didn't turn it. My mother called immediately. "Just this once," she said. "You know your sister. She's stressed. You're strong." "Being strong doesn't mean being the family's sponsor," I told her. She sighed. "You always make it about money." And there it was again, the invisible rule. I could give, endlessly, lovingly, but the moment I said no, the family narrative painted me as selfish. 3 nights later, the DJ needed a deposit for the baby shower extras. I tucked one small boundary into the contract. The final balance required text authorization. No auto charge. It felt like taping a note to my future self. You can still say no. I wanted to believe I wouldn't need it. Hope is cheap. Parties are not. I thought about my career, my nights teaching languages to beginners who never graded me. They said merci like candy. They never judged my voice, my limits, my patience. And yet, the family that should have loved me most kept testing the edges of my endurance. Then came the small injustices, the little microaggressions. Lila requested additional favors for the shower, the dessert cart, extra photographer hours, custom balloon arches. I checked my spreadsheet, balanced the numbers, and quietly absorbed the cost. I wrote in the margin, "Love is practical." Except love had a cost, and the cost was starting to wear me down. The morning of the shower, I reminded myself why I did this. Because I loved her. Because I wanted to make her day perfect. Because family should matter. But the moment she cracked a joke at my expense, the laughter, her friends, my aunt, everyone, cut through me. The joke wasn't new. It was a pattern, repeated across birthdays, graduations, minor holidays. Any day I tried to stand quietly at the edges. Yet this time, something inside me was shifting. Something subtle, like the creak of a door that's been locked too long. I found myself rehearsing phrases in Spanish, French, and Italian, not to respond, but to assert a boundary without losing my dignity. I would not let my life be invisible any longer. Even as I moved through the day, the tension built. Every request, every small favor, every push for extra spending reminded me of the imbalance. Lila's energy was endless, radiant, but exhausting. Mine had limits. I realized I had been conditioned to say yes, to make the world smooth for everyone else, and to ignore the friction it created in my own heart. And I realized something else. Saying yes was easier than saying no. Saying no was terrifying. Saying no could rupture relationships. Saying no could be seen as unkind, ungrateful, even cruel. But the joke had cracked something open. The long-standing rule that my love must be invisible was under scrutiny. That night, I closed the laptop, stared at the ceiling, and rehearsed a phrase over and over: enough. I would still love, I would still care, I would still help where it mattered, but I would no longer pay for humiliation. I would no longer fund disrespect. The tipping point was approaching, quiet as a heartbeat, yet inevitable. And in the quiet of that night, I finally admitted it to myself. The cost of kindness was too high if it came at the expense of my own dignity. The storm would come at the next family event, and when it did, I intended to stand tall, no matter the consequences. The morning of the shower, I felt the familiar ache of anticipation mixed with dread. I arrived early, carrying boxes, checking table runners, taping cords. I wanted everything perfect, not for praise, not for thanks, but because I had always been the one who made things happen, the one who kept the chaos at bay. Lila arrived in a white dress, glowing with excitement and confidence. One hand rested on her belly, the other tapping away at her phone. Guests clapped, and I retreated to the shadows, slicing cupcakes, answering questions, fixing small problems before they became big ones. And then she did it. "Look at Jessica," she said, her voice a knife wrapped in silk. Casual, mean. That shirt, cheap. And her voice, like a Chihuahua trying to sound elegant. The room chuckled. A friend smirked. My aunt smiled in that subtle way that signals complicity without witnesses. I froze for a heartbeat, then let the quiet settle over me. I had heard this before. I had translated insults in 3 languages for strangers, for friends, for strangers disguised as friends. But today was different. Today, I was no longer invisible. I stepped forward, holding a tray of cupcakes like a shield. I smiled calmly and spoke in Spanish. I understand everything, including when generosity is confused with servitude. Then I repeated it in French, then Italian. The room paused. The DJ lowered the music. Even my mother's jaw, usually rigid with warnings, softened slightly. No one had ever spoken like that to Lila before, not with clarity, not with authority, not without anger, but with dignity. I handed out cupcakes, letting the moment sink into the room like a quiet stone dropped in a pond. Then I walked outside for a breath of air. My phone buzzed. Pending charges for extras, $410. I scrolled, stared at the green call button, and pressed. Close the open bar. I returned inside, calm, determined. The games continued, laughter echoing around me, but I felt the weight in my chest lift slightly. I wasn't bending anymore. I wasn't absorbing every insult, every request, every demand. I had started saying yes for love. Now I could say no for respect. It was time. When the DJ asked for me to speak, a nod to tradition, to family rituals, I walked up, not taking the microphone, standing by the cake. I spoke clearly. "I'm happy for my niece," I said. "I hope she grows up loved, safe, and taught that kindness isn't a debit card." Some guests laughed politely, thinking I was making a joke. Lila's smile tightened, her teeth showing. "What?" she asked, her tone still light enough for the room. I repeated my words in Spanish, then French, then Italian. The DJ lowered the music further. The room fell into a quiet hum of anticipation. "Enough," I added finally in English. The single word cut through the room. Lila's smile faltered. My mother reached for my arm. "For the baby," she whispered. "For the baby," I replied evenly. "I'm learning boundaries." Lila's eyes widened, the color of anger and disbelief mingling in her gaze. "This is revenge," she spat. "No," I said softly. "This is clarity. I will love my niece. I will not be your wallet." "You're cheap!" Lila screamed, louder than intended. "Maybe," I said, "but I can finally afford my dignity." The manager returned, confirming that the dessert card add-ons were pending my authorization. None would be charged. I smiled, letting it sink in. The room wanted a reset. I gave it one. "Let's have cake," I said. The guests clapped too eagerly. We sang, We cut. Lila's grin returned for the photos, but it was tighter, smaller, forced. I handed out slices with steady hands, finally feeling the ground beneath me. After the party ended, the chaos of relatives, hugs, and congratulations, I stepped outside under the awning. Rain-scented air curled around me. My phone was heavy in my hand, buzzing with missed calls and messages. I ignored them. For the first time in years, the weight in my chest wasn't pain, guilt, or obligation. It was relief. I had done the work I could do, loved without losing myself, and drawn the line. That night, I sat quietly, reflecting on the years of bending, giving, translating, and covering. I realized the lesson was simple. Love is practical. Love is generous. But it is not a license for abuse. For the first time, I could rest. For the first time, I could love my niece without losing my voice, my dignity, or my boundaries. The day after the shower, silence wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. My phone vibrated endlessly, but I let it rest face down. Calls from my mother, texts from Lila, notifications from distant relatives, they all demanded attention, but I had none to give, not yet. For years, I had lived as the family's invisible anchor, solving problems, translating, paying bills, covering crises. Now I was visible, and I had drawn a boundary. That boundary didn't erase love, but it reshaped it. Mom called first. "Jessica," she said, almost pleading, "you made your sister cry. You embarrassed your father. You ruined a beautiful day." I closed my eyes. I knew the words weren't about me. They were about control, tradition, expectations. "All for money, all for respect," I said softly. "We gave what we could. I gave what I could. I will not pay to be insulted." 2 days later, Lila texted from my father's phone. "You made me look stupid. Everyone was talking. I didn't put your joke on a mic." "You know I didn't mean it," I replied. "It wasn't meant as a joke. It was truth." Her reply came fast, almost venomous. "You think you're a hero because you know words? You're nothing without us." I stared at my phone, the weight of her expectation pressing in. "That might be true," I typed slowly, "but I am less without me. I will not pay to be the punchline." A week later, the baby arrived. Lila sent a message. "Don't come if you're not apologizing." I didn't reply. I waited. I had learned that absence, calm, and clarity sometimes spoke louder than 100 words. Mom tried nostalgia, sending a photo of us as children, swinging together. "You loved her then. Love her now." I stared at our faces, tiny, smiling, innocent. I did love her, but love wasn't permission to bend endlessly, to lose myself for the comfort of others. I typed, "I will love my niece. I will see her when the adults can speak to me with respect. No apologies will be traded for basic decency." In the weeks that followed, I carved out routines that belonged solely to me. Mondays, 2 language lessons and laundry. Tuesdays, a long walk with the evening air, thick with Italian news on my headphones. Wednesdays, therapy. Thursdays, a call with my friend Rena. Fridays, a movie alone. Saturdays, sleep. Sundays, library and meal prep in quiet solitude. I no longer answered every message instantly. I no longer ran to fix small emergencies. I still loved my family, but I loved myself first. 2 months after the birth, Lila sent a request. "Can you send $200 for copay and gas?" I typed calmly, "I hope everything goes well. I cannot send money, but I can help you ask questions if you need support." Her response, "Forget it." And I did. I let it be. The spell was broken. I had learned to separate love from obligation, to separate kindness from self-erasure. I realized finally that family was never a license to exploit generosity. It was a place for shared respect, mutual support, and honest boundaries. Each day, I could breathe a little easier. I could love without fear. I could exist without bending under the weight of everyone else's expectations. 2 months later, when the baby's baptism was scheduled, I showed up not to pay or cover, but to witness. I stood quietly in the back, holding Valentina for 20 seconds, taking one blurred photograph for myself. I didn't participate in the orchestrated family photo shoot. I didn't answer every question or provide constant help. I was present, yes, but on my terms. And in that presence, I discovered freedom. I could be kind and present without losing myself. I could love without sacrificing dignity. I could finally exist as someone who mattered, not only as a utility for others. The family still texted, still called, still tried to pull me back into old patterns. But I had built my line, my rule, my limit. Speak to me with respect, or I step aside. The smell of the bakery downstairs, the warmth of the kitchen in the early morning, the quiet of a book in sunlight, all of it reminded me that life could be rich and gentle if I allowed it. I smiled. For the first time in years, love was simple again. Not transactional, not bound by debt or obligation. Just love, quiet, patient, and steady. Weeks turned into months. The calls and messages from my family slowed, their urgency diluted by time. I had finally built the invisible walls I had always dreamed of, walls that didn't block love, but blocked exploitation. I would still love my niece, Valentina. I would still attend family events when invited. But the rules were clear: respect first. Money, favors, translation, emotional labor, none of it would be automatic. None of it would be unconditional. Each morning, I woke and poured coffee into my favorite mug, a small crescent moon painted across the side. The smell, the warmth, the quiet. The little rituals became proof that I existed for myself. My students messaged me in Spanish, French, Italian, sending thanks for lessons they actually practiced. I smiled at their sincerity, free from obligation or expectation. The family chat still pinged occasionally. Lila's messages were shorter, sharper, testing the boundaries, but I no longer flinched. Speak to me with respect, I typed. That was all. My mother eventually accepted it, slowly, in fragments of acknowledgement. The lessons I had learned weren't flashy or dramatic. They were simple but hard-earned. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. Kindness doesn't mean being a doormat. Generosity doesn't obligate abuse. Boundaries are not betrayal. They are survival. One quiet evening, I held Valentina while Lila fussed over the baby's blanket. Our eyes met for a brief second, and I saw curiosity instead of accusation, the soft recognition that I could be part of her life without being a servant to the past. I kissed Valentina's forehead and whispered, "You will be loved, but I will not vanish to make anyone else comfortable." I realized I had spent so many years translating words for others that I had forgotten to translate my own feelings, to name my limits, to honor my own needs. Now, I could, and the difference was seismic. I didn't need apologies anymore. I didn't need anyone to validate my choices. The quiet pride in my chest, the steady rhythm of my own life, was enough. I wrote small notes for Valentina, cards tucked into her baby drawer, messages she would never read but might someday understand. You deserve love that is free, honest, and kind. I will be here, always, without compromise to who I am. The family would continue to test, to push, to expect. But I was no longer the child who absorbed every blow, who bent for everyone's comfort. I was Jessica Edwards, 28, a woman who had spent years making everyone else comfortable and had finally made herself a priority. I could love, I could give, I could be present, but only on terms that honored my dignity. That was the new rule. That was the unbreakable line. And in that quiet morning light, as Valentina cooed softly in her blanket, I felt the profound calm of ownership over my life. My voice, my choices, my love, finally mine. No debt, no apology, just clarity, just love. My phone lay face down on the table, no longer heavy. I could finally breathe. I could finally exist. I could finally be me.